Welcome to Tom Talks. Join me once a week right here on Tom Boley YouTube channel. We're going to break down all the latest and greatest walleye fishing tips, walleye fishing tricks, the absolute location where these fish are right now, and all the practical relevant information you want and need. Hooked up. And look at that, just gone. For all the information you want and need, stay tuned right here once a week, Tom Talks. What's going on, guys? Welcome to the first installment of Tom Talks. This is not truthfully the first installment. I've actually used to do a few of these years ago, kind of when I started my YouTube channel, and it's kind of a great video that I'm going to start doing once a week where I can talk just kind of about what's going on, where am I finding fish, what baits are working well, and a lot of ins and outs of stuff that does not fit in a lot of the other videos I do throughout the week. I'm on the water 7 days a week trying to get hardcore practical information videos, but a lot of times I go out there with a direct objective to film, and if I don't get that objective, I don't air a video from that day, even though I might have caught fish or the video just didn't. There's almost twice as much stuff that I film that actually makes it to YouTube. So this is a great opportunity to talk about a lot of that stuff, a lot of the tips and tricks stuff. And like I said, I want to do this once a week, and I hope you guys like these. You guys got to give me some feedback and kind of what you guys want to hear, and we might get to some YouTube questions and kind of the next one of these maybe next week or something like that, because you guys have a ton of questions, right? My channel is 100% based upon practical, realistic information that you can watch a video on, you can go out to the lake, you can put it to use, and likely catch fish on your lake under the same scenarios that I'm in. And my content is incredibly relevant. A lot of it is uploaded the same day it's filmed, and at most it's like 1-2 days behind. So we're not shooting a TV show where we shoot something in April and it gets aired in May. We're not shooting something in May that gets aired in July. So it's incredibly practical and relevant information. Really, the whole channel is. So today we're going to talk about is, we got a cool one here. First thing we're going to talk about is where are fish right now, right? That's the biggest thing. I'm a very realistic fisherman in the sense that I'm not looking for magic lures 99% of the time. What I'm looking for is where fish are, and based on where fish are dictates how you fish them, right? That's a big switch in logic for a lot of guys that are probably just getting into walleye fishing and stuff like that. Next thing we're going to talk about is slip bobber fishing, which is presentation oriented, but it's a technique that I think is incredibly underutilized. It's an incredibly archaic way of fishing, right? Slip bobber fishing has been around forever and ever, and I think it's relatively underutilized today. There's a lot of ins and outs to slip bobbering, and I probably do more slip bobbering than probably almost anybody for walleyes, to the point where a lot of you guys, some of you guys on YouTube, almost make fun of me because I do so much slip bobbering, but it is so effective, and a lot of times I feel bad uploading so many slip bobber videos, but it's such a killer way to fish once you kind of learn how to position, how to keep your bait around fish all the time, and those are kind of the main keys to slip bobbering. But we're gonna talk about that, and the other big one, we're gonna talk about the #1 mistake guys make in walleye fishing. So we're gonna dig right into it, no more messing around. Where are fish right now, right? Well, pretty much all across walleye world. Lakes differ, there's obviously just a million different bodies of water, but what I'm seeing up here, we had this crazy warm up out of a relatively cold spring, right? We were into like our 3rd week in May, and it was just cold. We still had water temps in the upper 40s, which isn't really super uncommon, but that is pretty cold. And then all of a sudden, from the upper 40-degree range, water temps pretty much shot straight to that low 60, mid 60-degree range, which is a lot of what I'm seeing right now. And a low in that mid 60-degree range, what you find is a lot of fish kind of relatively deeper on structure. Like, it's nothing to find a lot of fish 15, 20 feet of water, 22 feet of water when you have water temps in the mid 60s. But due to the spike, what we're seeing, it's almost, and it depends on how your lake's set up, right? There's some lakes where those fish sit in that 5 to 7 foot stuff in this early spring is only 100 yards from where they might sit, kind of in that early summer period like we're at now. There's other lakes that might not set up this way where that transition's much longer. So we're seeing some lakes fish incredibly well, and a lot of these fish are in transit or kind of spread out because you got fish in 5 feet. I was catching walleyes in 4 feet of water today on a sandbar, right? And the water was 65 and it was sunny out. There's other fish that are in 16 feet of water on deeper rock edges, stuff like that. So fish are kind of all over the place. But what we're seeing for the most part is we're targeting a lot of that 8 to 15, 14 foot range. That's kind of the sweet spot on the lakes I'm fishing right now. And we're fishing a lot of weeds, and we're starting to mix in a little bit of rock too. And these rock bites are gonna get better and better and better kind of in the coming weeks here, especially on that secondary stuff. You know, a lot of times when I talk about, you know, primary, secondary is like that shoreline stuff, right? It's that stuff that's like generally 5 feet to like 10 feet. It's shoreline oriented. It's a big point. It's a big flat. And then that next 15, 17 foot hump is kind of the spot where a lot of these fish are going to end up in a couple of weeks, because we had this just absurd water temp spike, right? But right now there's still kind of fish in both, in between. There's a few up shallow, there's a few mid depth. And you know, some of our lakes that are fishing the best are lakes that have a lot of sand and then spotty weeds. And what that does is it keeps those fish, you know, in the spring they're way up on that sand, and then this early summer period they gravitate right to these pockets of weeds. And those are kind of our lakes that are fishing super good right now, because there's a ton of fish on that 10 to kind of 15 foot weed edge stuff. And I filmed a bunch of videos in that scenario this week where I was catching a lot of fish on those spots, right? On slip bobbers primarily. And the other style lake we're fishing is a lake that is set up with a ton of weeds, a ton of shallow structure, and then not a lot of that mid-depth kind of, you know, 10 to 15 foot stuff. And you know, if your lake sets up like that, like let's say you have a lake that's a big ring around the shoreline, right? It's a big, slow, gradual break out to like 12 feet of water. And then you have some humps that are like 15 or 25 feet, stuff like that, out in the middle. And you know, this is the time of year where there's gonna be fish on that weed edge, and there's also gonna be a few fish out on the hump. And the number one way I'm catching fish on those lakes right now is generally presentations that cover water, because I'm not seeing huge clumps of fish on anything in particular. You got a few here, you got a few here, you got a few mid-depth, few shallow, a few out deep. And you know, it's either bombing a big plastic out there, snapping it real fast through stuff, or you know, we're pulling spinners. And spinners have been an absolute killer way to target fish in those style of lakes in the past week, because you can put the trolling motor down, throw that spinner back, cover that whole weed edge from 5 feet all the way out to 18 feet if you want. And that's been a super productive way to fish. So going forward, as this water temp keeps warming up, we're gonna see a much better bites out in that 15, 16, 17 foot stuff. Whether that's a weed edge, because right now what we're seeing is fish on an inside weed edge, fish in the weeds, and then fish on the outside weed edge. What you want as a fisherman, what I want as a fisherman, is all the fish in one thing, right? If all the fish are on the weed edge, the outside weed edge, it's super good, right? Because it makes it super easy. But if you have fish inside, outside, middle, it's a lot of, you know, looking at a graph and saying, oh, there's 2 fish there, there's 3 fish here, there's 2 fish there. But in coming weeks here, and really realistically pretty soon, once that water temp kind of pushes down a little bit farther, you're gonna see a lot more fish on that outside weed edge, and you're gonna see a lot more fish relating to kind of those mid-depth humps, kind of that 13 to 20 foot stuff's gonna really start to pop here in the next couple weeks. So that's kind of the deal as far as presentation goes right now, or location goes right now. That's the stuff I'm looking for. And you know, each day I kind of check that little bit deeper stuff, and I'll keep checking it and checking it. If I totally lose fish in my 7 foot stuff, I'll go out to the next thing and look at that, right? And it's a lot of just looking for the most part. And side imaging is still really key in these depths. Although you're gonna start seeing a lot more fish on sonar and down imaging once these fish push out past that 15 foot mark. So keep that in mind. Location wise, that's what I'm doing, that's where I'm looking, and that's where I'm catching fish right now. So moving on, next thing I want to talk about, slip bobber fishing. It's an extremely old school way to target fish. I think a lot of guys have a misconception about how you slip bobber fish. You know, if this is the first video of mine you've ever watched, it might look like a lot of times like I throw the trolling motor down, spot lock, and I sit there for like hours fishing, right? I'm just throwing my slip bobbers back, waiting for bites. This is not how I slip bobber at all. I have a very aggressive style of slip bobber fishing, as do most guys who probably do a lot of effective and successful slip bobber fishing. And most of the time what I'm doing, it's I'm fishing a big weed edge. And I think I'm not really sure where this video is going in. So if I might have already posted this video, or I'm about to, but it's gonna be called How Walleyes, no, it's not. It's gonna be the video after that. But there's gonna be a video where basically what I'm doing is I'm putting down a weed edge with my trolling motor. And I'm looking for clusters of fish off the left or right side, kind of whichever side that weed edge is on. And once I see that pod, spot lock, bobber. I'm gonna throw generally 2 or 3 bobbers right at this school of 4 to 10 fish, right? I'll give it 5-10 minutes. If normally I would have them by then, if I don't have a fish by then, I'm just either assuming those fish moved or they're not biting, I'm going on to the next pod. I call it like combat slip bobbering, you can call it whatever you wanna call it, but it's a very aggressive style of slip bobbering. And the number one idea behind it is being 100% sure every time you cast that slip bobber out, you are in fish or very near to fish, right? And I rely extremely heavily on side imaging when I'm doing this. And I try to show it as much as I can in videos. And you know, that kind of brings me to the next point is, you know, the making sure you're in fish part. So let's say you have a jig on, right? How are you fishing a jig on a cast in that 10, 12, 15 foot stuff? Well, most of us are not going vertical. We're casting that jig out to where we think the fish are, and we're working it back. Now let's say that school is right here on that weed edge. You make a cast into the weeds, you go boom, 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 and then you're out of the fish. You know, that bait is in fish for how long? You know, 3, 5 seconds, 3, 4, 5 jig strokes, right? Slip bobbering is so effective, especially when you have like a leech or a crawler or something that just has a real finessey movement, because it stays in the fish 100% of the time. And there's very few things that you can throw out and leave in the fish, stay stationary with, and have it catch fish, right? That is the total deal with the slip bobber. You know, like if you relate it to something else, like maybe a drop shot, right? You can throw a drop shot out and just keep kind of wiggling that thing and have something kind of bouncing on there and keep it stationary. But even that is nowhere near as effective as a slip bobber for that stationary style of fishing. But when you are fishing stationary, you have to be 100% sure you're in fish, right? So it's kind of a double-edged sword. And you know, you see, I watch a lot of guys slip bobber up here, and you know, they'll throw an anchor out or they're spot lock, you'll drive by them, you'll go hit 4 or 5 spots, you'll come back and they're still sitting there, right? And you know that no school is that bountiful where you can sit there for 3, 4 hours and continue to catch fish out of that same school. At least not in the lakes I fish. So, you know, it's this aggressive style of looking for fish on side imaging, seeing them, casting to them. And another thing that this style of fishing gets, you know, and we'll talk about this in the next thing we're going to talk about, but you know, as you kind of move quicker like this, you get a better idea of where all the fish are in the lake, right? Versus just sitting in one spot, catching 7 fish in 3 hours and saying that was a decent evening, right? When you hit this many spots, you might strike out on 3, 4 pods of fish and not catch a single fish. But at the end of the day, you're like, well, there's 4 pods there, there's 2 pods here, we caught 6 out of this one, 2 out of that one, and 3 out of that one, right? So, you know, it's just a more aggressive, more looking around, combat style slip bobbering that is incredibly effective and gives you a better lay of the land. So I think slip bobbering is super underutilized. Like I said before, I honestly think I get made fun of for slip bobbering so much on YouTube, but it's so incredibly effective, and guarantee you the best times to slip bobber is pretty much from Memorial Weekend till like that second week in July. And I always start out with leeches, and generally kind of late June into July I'll start going crawlers, and you see a guaranteed switch pretty much no matter where you're fishing. It'll go leech, 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 and then crawler. But right now, pretty much for the month of June, it's tough to beat leeches, honestly, whether you're pulling spinners or you're slip bobber fishing. So that's kind of the deal there. Next, we're going to talk about the #1 walleye fishing mistake. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about a little bit ago, but it's a mistake that a lot of guys make, and they kind of continue to make. And what I think it is guys sit still way too long, right? It's too much. Guys think of walleye fishing as this fish that requires endless finesse, right? It's a lot of casts or a lot of just sitting still, waiting for that window to happen, or waiting for, you know, that bait to drift by the fish just right. And you know, some of that is true, yes. Is there windows for every kind of species? Yes. Is there a certain kind of finesse that you have to do anytime it bites tough? Yes. But it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with slip bobbers. You got to make sure you're in fish. And you know, a lot of times guys will say like, oh, what are you doing? It's a cold front, right? Well, generally in a cold front, or really anytime fish are more negative or more neutral, what ends up happening is you end up having to put that bait in front of more fish than you would catch on a good day, right? That's a lot of times how I look at negative or neutral fish or a cold front or anything like that. So generally it's going to take more casts to catch those fish than it would on a good day. Or a change in presentation, but a lot of times even changing presentations and doing everything right, what you end up with is just still having to keep that bait in front of more fish, or put that bait in front of more fish to get the same amount of bites you would on a good day by putting that bait in front of less fish, right? So basically, you know, I generally fish very aggressive when I'm walleye fishing. It's nothing for me whether I'm casting swim baits, whether I'm slip bobber fishing, whether I'm jig and wrap fishing in the summer. You know, to pull up to a spot, see the fish, make 5 casts to a lot of fish, and if I don't get bit, you know, and I know I'm throwing a relatively close bait to what's going to work, I'm on to the next pod, right? Because a lot of times you'll see these pods across a given lake fire at different times. And one thing you notice, kind of the more and more you fish and see those fish and learn spots and see where, you know, kind of active fish sit, is there's definitely spots where walleyes will be more likely to sit when they are very active. And a lot of times that's on top of structure, but not always. It's kind of lake to lake, and it varies quite a bit. But you know, moving around like this, moving around more, like we talked about in the slip-bobber thing, it gives you a better idea of where a lot of different fish are in that lake. And, you know, the guy who's sitting still, he might be on a great spot, right? But, you know, how many fish can realistically come out of one spot day after day after day? Not a lot, right? There's very few lakes that are good enough or can even be fish like that, and fish are that predictable day to day to day. And, you know, it's super common for guys to sit still for way too long. I see it almost every single day. And when I used to run a lot of guide trips, you know, we'd pull up to a spot, we'd be snap jigging vertically for, you know, 45 seconds, and I'd be like, all right, reel up, we're out. And, you know, that's not uncommon. It is productive to fish that way. You know, you just go pod to pod to pod to pod of fish, looking for those more aggressive fish. And definitely sitting still is the #1 mistake I see a lot of guys make when walleye fishing. Walleyes are definitely a predator, and the more you treat them like a predator via fishing aggressive, covering a lot of that water, the more they almost become a predator. A lot of times I say the harder you work that bait, the more likely those fish are to bite when they're definitely in a good mood. So, and just a few things to think about there, but that's definitely the #1 mistake I see, is guys sitting still way too long when walleye fishing. So yeah, that's kind of what I got for tonight. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. It's kind of you know, me talking about just stuff that's going on, bites I'm seeing and stuff like that. So hopefully you guys found this interesting. And the next one, I definitely want to answer a whole bunch of YouTube comments, because you guys have a ton of YouTube comments. But one that keeps coming in repetitively today, because I just uploaded a spinner rig video, is how fast are you trolling? Whenever I'm pulling spinners, I'm pretty much going 1.2 to 1.4. There's different spinners you can pull slower and different spinners that sometimes work faster, but that's basically the speed. So there's our final parting little tidbit of information there. Shelby has some fish going, so I'm gonna go eat a fish fry tonight. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Stay tuned for next time. Drop some comments below on what you guys want to hear. Like I said, there's not a set day. We're gonna do this every week, but once a week we are gonna do a Tom Talks video. So thank you guys for watching. If you're not yet, please subscribe. Stay tuned for more.